Hi everyone. I'm Fran Perrin. I'm a philanthropist, I'm a funder, a donor, and I'm the money. And it's a very rewarding but a very strange and frustrating job. So how do you get to be a donor? Well, most of the most amazing projects that we've heard about today are funded by some kind of grant or charitable organisation. And there's a good reason for that, which is if you're in human rights or anti-corruption in order to make profit, believe me, you are in the wrong business. There's probably something weird if you're successfully making money from tackling corruption. So how do you get to be a donor? When I was 18, I inherited wealth. I wasn't expecting it, I didn't know anything about it, and all I knew was that I wanted to give it away, that I wanted to use this extraordinary privilege to make as much change in the world as I could. But it turns out that there's no user manual on how to be a philanthropist, on how to give money away well. So for about the last 20 years, I've been trying to work out how to do that job. And I'm still learning, but I've got a few of the answers. So I set up my foundation. It's called the Indigo Trust. We're a small UK grant-making foundation, and we fund civil technology projects, mainly in sub-Saharan Africa. We particularly look for small, high-risk pilots. We're a kind of angel investor in this space, looking for projects that don't have a 10-year track record, that don't have 5 years of audited accounts, because they're trying something new that could really work. We look at civic tech, transparency, accountability, parliamentary monitoring, anything that opens up democracy and gives people a chance to access the information they need to change their lives. We were one of the first grant funders of My Society in the UK, and we funded them for over 10 years, particularly on their parliamentary monitoring work. And we now fund them to partner with civic tech organisations in different parts of Africa who are trying to reuse their open code to build parliamentary monitoring sites, freedom of information, anything that opens up their democracies. And we fund technology hubs. They're innovation spaces, collaborative workspaces. So far, we funded 21 of them across 12 different countries in Africa. These are about building the ecosystem for civic tech, places where people like you can come together, meet like-minded activists, get mentoring and support on your projects, and build locally relevant tools. We all have supported organisations like Code for South Africa, which have done incredible work in South Africa, tackling corruption, doing investigative journalism, and helping build their own ecosystem. We fund grassroots human rights organisations like Black Sash, also in South Africa, who are using traditional human rights campaigning, but fused with modern data tools to drive reporting on the ground. And we fund budget transparency, which not everyone finds exciting, but I do, and it's a great example of how you can turn data into action. I encourage you all to talk to Richard Gevers, who's here from Open Data Durban. He's one of our grantees, so he can give you an honest answer on how successful we are. He's a great example of place-based accountability, going to people where they are to solve their problems. We don't just see this as funding a data dump, though. We work with investigative journalists, with data journalists, with campaigners to make sure that the data is used to support campaigns for real change. So that's great, right? How well would we do if there was a TripAdvisor for funders? We'd get 5 out of 5, right? Thumbs up. Well, we decided to evaluate ourselves, and we looked at our data for the last 3 years. And in that time, we got 818 proposals from organisations, and we funded 104 of them. So we did a bit of a calculation on how long people, on average, spend writing a proposal. And we've realised that we've wasted 2 years and 9 months of charities' time with them writing proposals that we were never going to fund. And I don't see that as a success. And it's wasted our time because we're a team of 2.5 people in London sifting through proposals for things that we were never going to fund. So instead of a harmonious relationship, more often the grantee donor relationship feels like this. It's frustration, it's exasperation. The whole process is ridiculously frustrating for both sides. We've trapped ourselves in a situation that forces us to lie to each other. Here's what it would sound like if we actually told you the truth. Impact. What impact will your project have? Well, by definition, it's probably innovative. It's a pilot. You don't have a 10-year record of evidence because the technology you're using didn't exist 10 years ago. So you can't guarantee that it's going to make any lasting change, but you promise it will because you know that's what we want to hear. Is it scalable and replicable? Well, the honest answer would probably be, it would be if we gave you enough money to scale it and replicate it, but we've given you £5,000 for one pilot in one council area, so we've no idea if it's scalable or not. When will you become financially sustainable? Well, you're not going to become financially sustainable because we haven't funded you for enough years to demonstrate your impact, so you can't convince any other donor to help make you sustainable. Are you eligible for our funding? Well, it depends what the trustees are feeling like this week. And by the way, we just changed all our eligibility criteria and forgot to tell you about it. So why didn't you apply before our funding deadline? Well, maybe you haven't heard of us because we're quite an obscure, small, London-based trust. Actually, we publish a really expensively produced annual report. It's printed and everything. If you're really lucky, it's locked away in a PDF somewhere on our website that you've never heard of. You're mainly chasing core funding. That's the dream, isn't it? Funding to do what you need to do. So why are donors so reluctant to fund core funding? It's because we're obsessed with impact. And honestly, it's really hard to evaluate the impact of core funding because you might go and spend it on frivolous things like rent and salaries, and that makes it harder for us, the funder, to measure the impact of our money. Impact. We are obsessed with impact. But actually, we're not obsessed with your impact. We're obsessed with our impact because we're terrified that in 20 years, someone will say that we've wasted this money, that we would have spent it better on vaccines or clean water or shelter for the homeless. That's our secret fear, and any donor who pretends that it isn't is lying to you. This is Andrew Carnegie, and in 1889 he wrote a book called The Gospel of Wealth that laid the foundation for modern philanthropy. And he said it was the moral responsibility of the rich to redistribute their money, private money, for public good, for the maximum possible benefit. And to be honest, not a lot has changed in grant funding since then. Everything we do day to day in grant meetings would be recognizable to him. So this is what it feels like. It's a mess. It's exasperating. Massive amounts of time are being wasted on both sides of the equation. And at the heart of it, we're funding blind. We don't know what projects are out there. We're trying to look for you. You're trying to look for donors. You're trying to search for that dream donor who will give you core, unrestricted funding on a long-term basis so you don't have to keep on reapplying. And we, the donors, are looking for that perfect project that's scalable, that's replicable, that can demonstrate all sorts of impact, that will change the world, but is really, really cheap. So I have one question. Why haven't we applied our amazing tech skills to modernizing grant funding? And this is my suggested answer. Because all the people with amazing tech skills, like you, sitting in this room, are stuck in a power imbalance with the people like me who have the money but no skills. And this is why we're stuck in a broken system. Gates and Soros were disruptive innovators in business. But how are they going to disrupt their giving away of money? I haven't seen it yet. I wanted it to be as easy as this. When I was 18 and I was starting out, I wanted to look up where the money was going. Who are the other funders? Where do they fund? It's exactly the same as when you're looking for someone who might fund you. I don't know about your countries, but in the UK, it is very, very hard to find out this information. The Charity Commission in the UK requires the bare minimum of information. If you look up Indigo, it says, we are a charity and we give to charities. That is not particularly helpful in deciding whether you should apply. So I decided to look for the smallest possible amount of data. What's the smallest unit? And it turns out to be the grant. So I set up 360 Giving. I asked, why isn't there an open data standard for grant funding? And it turns out there's no good reason at all. There's no technical reason, there's no financial reason. It's just that donors have never done it, and it's very hard to force donors to do anything. It's a campaign. It's applying civil technology to grant funding. And it's a campaign to persuade donors to do this voluntarily. Because we need to answer simple questions. We need to know, where's the money going? Is it going to the right places? How should I tailor my grant-making process? How should you tailor your application? And it's a data standard, so you can use it in a very simple way. We got amazing data scientists from the Open Data Services Cooperative to write the standard to make it as simple as possible, so that any funder, big or small, whether they've got a staff of hundreds or a staff of 2, could start to answer these questions. Where, when, for what, who? And it's a spreadsheet. It's not rocket science, it's this simple. It's about putting out the information the grant funders have, where they're funding, online so that anyone can use it. But it makes it possible to suddenly start to understand this obscure sector and see what's going on, so that you can get the information that you need, just like we need it. And it's working, much to my disbelief. We have 75 donors publishing. We've got over 280,000 grants in the UK captured to this standard. And that represents £24 billion worth of grant-making flows in the UK. We built GrantNav, a very simple search tool. It's online, have a look, play around with it, tell us what's wrong with it, all the code's on GitHub. And I want it to be so easy that you can have no tech skills at all. You can be a volunteer fundraiser in a tiny community charity. You can go and you can look up people who might fund you. This alone won't fix everything that's wrong with grant making, but it's a small part of a growing movement of people who are trying to fix it. Grant Advisor, which is going to be the first TripAdvisor for the grant-making world, has started in the US. Stanford Design School are looking at user design principles in philanthropy. There are 100 different tiny little initiatives starting off, and I want you to be part of them. In 20 years' time, I want us to look back and be astonished at how antiquated and old-fashioned grant-making was in 2018. What a waste of everyone's time and money it was to do it like this, with no information. I've done what I can in a very small way to try and make things better, but I can't do this on my own. So I'd like to ask all the donors in the room, think about how you can help fix the system. How would your grantees want you to change your process? And to all of you, I would encourage you to think about what you can do in your country. The funding system is broken. Help me to fix it. Thank you.